Not like a normal life, and it's not like somewhere where you can just get another job. It is your everything.
Farming has never been an easy job. Today, farmers must balance the legacy of generations before while keeping up with the new technologies and demands in an increasingly unstable climate. So how do farmers find the hope to keep going, even when the land dries up? This is John's story. Hi, I'm Jo Chamberlain from Messages of Hope. Today I have with me John Gladigau, third generation farmer here in South Australia. So tell me a bit of your history here in Alawina.
Yeah, well, our family came here in 1956, actually, my dad and his grandpa, and they came from the Adelaide Hills, good German stock, 4 sons, and not big enough property in the hills, so they came up looking for some cheap country, I suppose, to farm on, and came up here in 1956, which was the land of milk and honey that year in the flood year, and probably were, they may have been conned a little bit, thinking that was how it was all the time. And came up here, and in their first 3 years were droughts and rabbit plagues, and in fact in 1957, their first year here, they caught so many rabbits they paid the interest bill on the farm just out of rabbits, which is quite extraordinary. And the rabbits, were just in absolute plague proportions. So, but yes, it was many years later that I came along, of course, but yeah, I've lived here all of my life. In fact, I lived in pretty much in the same house for all but the last 2 years of my life. So went to a local school, Brownswell. Only went to year 10, but came home because all I ever wanted to do was farm. And do what Dad did, and I guess he was my, who I looked up to. I just wanted to be a farmer, and like when I went to school, I milked 3 cows before I went to school every morning, and we had about 1,200 sheep, and we had maybe 1,500 acres of crop. And I was really fortunate in that my dad, he very early involved me in the management of the farm, and I don't think you always see that in farming operations, and was quite happy to hand over some of the responsibility, and we sort of did it together. And as someone who's I guess a bit of a control freak as I am as well, I think that was really good for me, that I could actually have that input from an early age. And yeah, look, the farm then sort of grew, over time, and we went through the tough periods of the 80s and in the early 90s, and that was a period of really high interest rates, and 22% interest rates, and low commodity prices and low margins, I guess. And so we went through a real period where I guess I was really starting to ask questions about the future. I was seeing, neighbours buying out neighbours, and the communities getting smaller and smaller, and I guess left me to ask the question, so where are we going to be in 10 years' time? Yeah. Am I going to own my neighbour's property, or is he going to own mine? And that became a really big thing for me, as in, what is my future? And so I started looking at ways that we could create efficiencies and economies of scale, and I was very focused on, well, we just need to work together, more. Could we share labour? Could we share machinery? Could we share other things? Or how can we create scale? Like, what do we do? In 2007, I maybe stupidly, but I applied for a Nuffield farming scholarship, and I probably didn't really realise that you're probably supposed to be a bit educated and knowledgeable to do these sorts of things, but somehow I fluffed my way through and ended up extraordinary privilege to receive a Nuffield scholarship to travel the world in 2007, looking at collaborative farming, which is the idea of taking farms and putting them together and running them as one. So I had 16 weeks travelling the world, like literally the entire world, from North to South America, Asia, UK, just New Zealand, looking at collaborative farming. And when I came home, we joined together with Robin and Rebecca Schaefer to set up Bullabara, which is a large-scale collaborative farm. And basically what it is that I went from being a 100% owner of a 5,000-acre farm to becoming a 50% shareholder in a farm that ended up cropping 25,000 acres. And it was quite an amazing journey. We were one of the first people in the world to do that. So I guess everyone was looking at us waiting for it to fail. and find, farmers are good at that. We just sort of say, yeah, that won't work. And so, you just watch, they'll go broke, there was a
It's a big risk.
So it was a huge risk, it
Yeah.
was. And of course, scale obviously exasperates risk as well, but became a really successful model, and actually helped set up other farms around Australia who ended up doing the same.
But I'm sure it's not the same for a lot of people. Like a lot of our farmers are just trying to get by, aren't they?
Yeah.
To actually have that headspace to actually think collaboratively. For some of them, it's beyond their control, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, and it's certainly not for everyone. I mean, I would probably one of my big learnings is I wouldn't tell everyone to do it. Farming, agriculture, it's a high stakes game.
Yeah.
It really is, and it's not like other jobs. It's not more important than other jobs, and I'll reinforce it. I think as a farmer myself, and I know as lots of other farmers I know as well, get really grumpy when people say that we should put farmers on this pedestal and say that they're more important than everyone else. And thank God for a farmer, thank God where your food comes from, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's okay, but paramedics, doctors, nurses, teachers, Garbos, the person who works in McDonald's, everyone's important.
Yeah.
Like, every job is needed. Farming's one of those.
Yeah.
So don't put us on a pedestal. However, having said that, it's a very different type of a life, I suppose. It's a very different type of. There's an inherent risk that's in farming that's not in other jobs. I mean, in some ways, it's like any business where there's that inherent risk, but with agriculture, it's like at a whole different level.
Yeah.
And there wouldn't be too many farms today, like as in say cropping farmers, for example. A small cropping farmer, most of them, it's probably even for the smallest of them, $200,000 to $500,000 upfront costs to put a crop in. For large scale farms, it could be $2 to $3 million to put a crop in, and you actually literally have to find that money and put it out there to throw seeds and fertilizer in the ground, purchase fuel, pay for labour, machinery costs, in the hope that at the end of the year, the good Lord will send the rain, the sunshine, and keep away the frost and the bugs and the grasshoppers and the other plagues that tend the hail at the end of the year, and you'll end up with a return on that. And most years we do. Yeah. And that's part of what being a farmer. That's why we do it. There's the adrenaline of that. There's it's all we know in many ways, but there is a huge inherent risk in that. And of course, when we have a period like we've had, especially here in South Australia in the last 2 to 3 years, it's become the cumulative effect, which obviously is really impactful.
Tell me, how bad did it get?
I think the challenge of the current drought conditions is that it's off the back of what's happened in the last 10 years. In this area here, where I'm from, 2017, 2018 and 2019, each of those 3 years were in the 3 driest years in recorded history in 120 years, and they were consecutive.
Yes, yeah.
And we say that farmers should be able to handle a drought. Sure. In fact, in the Mallee where we are, you need to be able to handle 2 droughts. But to handle 3 and the 3 worst years in recorded history is almost more than what you can ask. And then we had a couple of quite good years, but all they do is kind of get you kind of on the pathway back to where you needed to be. And then we've been hit with the last 3, which have just been people haven't recovered from the first ones. Farmers in this country are absolutely remarkable. Like, what we can grow on not very much is at unprecedented levels. When we talk about being the most efficient farmers in the world, it's no just ambit claim. But the reality is we're a bit sick of talking about how good we grow a lot on nothing, because at the end of the day, a loss is a loss is a loss is a loss.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem is.
Do you ever get to that point of going, nah, it's too hard, I can't put another crop in?
Yes, that certainly does happen, and sometimes people make that decision and say, I just can't do this anymore. But there's plenty of other occasions where that decision is made for you, because the financiers will just say, no, I'm not going to support you anymore. And that's really, really tough, because for most farmers, they actually don't know any other life.
Yeah.
It's not it's not like a normal life, and it's not like somewhere where you can just go get another job. Agriculture is talked about as being a way of life, and it is that and more. I mean, it is your everything. Farming's a great life. It's a different life, and farmers see things differently. They do things differently, because when you're a farmer, you're working all the time. Like you never switch off, whether it's midnight, whether it's when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, whether it's whatever. You're always on, and you could say, oh, that's that shows how hard farmers work. Yeah, but we're also the slackest people in the world. Let's be honest, because we actually can choose to do what we want when we want. Yeah. And so, we have, our really busy times, like harvest now is a really busy time, seeding, other times, and when jobs have to be done, you just got to go and you've got to get them done. But then in between those times, you can make choices. And so, it's kids' sports day. Well, it's not a good spraying day, I'm going to sports day, right? If I want to take a couple of days off and go into kids' school camp, I can do that as well. We have a lot of flexibility, and so, it's a tough life, but it's also, a very flexible life. You ask a farmer, would you trade the hours you work with somebody who has to get on a train at 7 o'clock in the morning to get to a job by 9, to be there till 5, to get on a train for another 2 hours home again? And they'll say, not a chance, like never. Despite the fact there's probably more stability with that and a regular income stream. But it's the unsaid about farming is actually we got some good stuff going as well, and it is actually a great life.
But I suppose even in that instance, when you can choose what you do when, you're still living in this world of constantly having the farm in the back of your mind. Yeah. So when it is getting tough, when there's those moments, like you mentioned to me off camera about, like, I don't like to call myself a gambler, but it is kind of gambling. Like, you never know what to expect. How does that play on your mind, like the average farmer, to go, I don't know what I'm going to get, but I'm going to trust?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I, as a Christian, I sometimes wonder. I find it hard to contemplate being a farmer and not be a Christian, in that, because it is all about hope and trust, and like the Lord will provide, and if I didn't have that, I don't know how I'd handle a lot of that, because it's you're basically saying, well, here you go, God. I've done my bit, and now, I've got to do my management side, sure, and there's that role. But if the rain doesn't come from the sky, if the frost comes, if whatever, all of that is out of my hands, and so I live in hope. I live in trust, and that does carry you through most times. But when you have 1 drought, 2 droughts, 3 droughts. I think even certainly then it's tough. Like it's tough being a Christian in that environment too, because you start saying, "What you meant to provide? Why? Why are we going through these really tough times right now?"
Do you ever have those moments where you go, "Where are you, God?"
Oh, absolutely. I probably not publicly so much. But certainly, absolutely. And you think, where are you? Why aren't you? It's a bit like if someone's ill or whatever, you say, why me? Why us? But in farming, it's like the same thing. Well, we've had 2 droughts in a row, and now we've stepped out in faith to do it again, and the third one's worse than the first 2. And you say, what are you doing to me? Or where are you actually there? And I think as a Christian, I think that's normal. I don't think that makes you I don't think that means that you've lost faith as such. I think it's just a normal process of what it means to walk that walk and to be on that journey. And I think that's why it's really important to be talking with others as well, and to be expressing that and sharing that and hopefully building each other up through that, which is really important. That connection piece is really important.
Where does God show up in your life? What does God mean for you in this?
Well, I think as a farmer, you see God everywhere, and you see Him in the sunsets, you see Him in the sunrise, you see Him in the trees, and God is new life. You plant a seed in the ground, and then out of this seed, this thing emerges. And this seed's different than that seed, and it emerges differently, but I know how it will because that's how its path is. And so, I think as a Christian, that's the hope, and that's the affirmation, is that in everything you do, it's affirmed almost in nature. It's affirmed in, you see a newborn lamb and you see what it grows into. You see, I think that's where a lot of my, God journey is seeing it through nature and seeing it through my farming life, and that's something like I treasure, and so it's because of that that the hope comes through as well, because if God can create that life which turns into this, which turns it into a wheat crop, which I can then harvest, I can't do that on my own. I can only do the bits that I can do, and then I'm relying on God to do the rest. But it happens, and it happens all the time. It's quite extraordinary.
Does Scripture come to mind when you think about these things? Is there a particular verse that sustained you through all your farming?
I guess there's a few, I suppose, but I guess one of my favourites is Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the hills, from where does my help come? I just think it's such a beautiful verse, and it's something that I always sort of gives me inspiration in the morning.
And I love that trust too, because when you do lose hope, when you do have that moment of I have no idea what else to turn to, but I know of a loving Creator who's there.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and in control.
And in control, even when I don't think He's in control. And I think that's when so many times, and we spoke earlier about other times when you feel God's not there, and it's then you look back 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, and you go, I now can see Him there, and I can see Him there, and I could see Him there, but I couldn't see Him there at the time. And I think so quite often it is that looking back and the realisation, and it's an affirmation, really. I think that God is there and God is in control. Doesn't make it easier on the way through, should I say.
So as somebody who is advocating for community, is there something for us as community that we need to know? How can we rally around farmers?
Look, I think it's as much about looking to understand, what farmers are about, and not so much to put farmers on that big pedestal. Like I said before, like we are all important, but just knowing that farmers do live a different type of life, and they do carry different type of risks as well. And they're not always understood, and so because that, farmers tend to hold that really close because they don't think that people understand. We're not expecting your pity, we're not expecting your money, we're not expecting anything in that. But what we do, we like to share our stories. We'd like to, have understanding, and it's as much about us as farmers having understanding of the life that you might live, but also having that being two-way. So I think that the sharing stories things is really important. So I guess, if you meet a farmer and or you know a farmer, just go and ask them about what they do. But don't just say, things are obviously bad. Tell me about the bad stuff. Talk about the positives. Talk about the things that are great about being a farmer. Talk about the flexibility it gives, about the hope that it gives. I think they're the conversations that are really, really important to have. And through that, you can open up and have an understanding about the challenges as well. But don't just focus on the challenges, focus on the good stuff.
I can see how that would benefit both the listener and the person who's giving the story as well, because you're talking about gratitude, you're talking about being able to share the good moments. And I'm surprised by that, because I automatically assume that the greatest need from a farmer is for financial support. I've seen the hay bales going through the towns to go out to the rural communities, but what you're saying really is that being able to share stories is a pretty important part of it.
It is, and at the end of the day, we make a choice to do what we do.
Yeah.
Just as everyone makes a choice. You make a choice to be a nurse, you make a choice to be a plumber, you make a choice to live where you live, you make a choice of how many kids you have. There's all those choices that we make in life. We make a choice to live a life on the land, to take that risk, to do what we do. I don't expect anyone to come and to bail me out of that, but it is good that, to have the conversations and have the understanding of where we all fit in society and how we can all work together to be that one society going forward.
Thank you so much for your time today, John. You've had an amazing story to tell, and I pray that this may be the opening of other stories that we hear from farmers in this rural crisis, rural community. So thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thanks for coming out.